Why don't we have a sequel to Donkey Kong 64? Or, if not a sequel, another 3D World game featuring these Kongs. Banjo-Kazooie got Banjo-Tooie after all, so where's our sequel? Well, as we're all unfortunately aware, Microsoft purchased Rare on September 24, 2002. To give some context, the timeline of their released games kind of sheds a light on this shift. Banjo-Kazooie, 1998. Donkey Kong 64, 1999. Perfect Dark and Banjo-Tooie, 2000. Conker's Bad Fur Day, 2001. Star Fox Adventures, 2002. This isn't a bash at Rare or Microsoft, but I think this timeline kind of hints at why we haven't seen a Donkey Kong 64 sequel, and was scrapped during the transition to Microsoft. And with Rare possibly owning the rights to some characters such as Tiny, Lanky, and Chunky Kong, as well as being the only ones to really develop a 3D World Donkey Kong game, it's entirely possible that Nintendo just doesn't want to go forward with making a new 3D Donkey Kong game. I mean, there's not even a little hint of such a game existing. So if it was ever once discussed, it doesn't seem to have been made public. Sadly, I got my hopes up when stumbling upon this wiki fan site. It's so well detailed. For a split second, I thought maybe, just maybe, a sequel actually existed at one time. So let's say there was a sequel. Let's spend a minute designing the next Donkey Kong 64 game, titled Donkey Kong 65, or Donkey Kong 64 Part 2, or Donkey Kong Switch? We'll put a pin on that. Moving on. In a perfect world, it would be ideal to play as the same 5 Kongs: DK, Diddy, Tiny, Lanky, and Chunky. But for a sequel, and a title that would run on a better, stronger console, that could open the door to a few more playable characters. Dixie Kong immediately comes to mind. She's been a playable character in the past. Let's bring her into the crew for another adventure. It would be pretty neat to have Funky Kong available as a playable character, similar to the Funky mode in Tropical Freeze. But 7 playable characters might be pushing it too much. Unless there's a unique way to combine 2 characters like Banjo and Kazooie, or even something like Zelda and Sheik. But even that's pushing it. It would probably be ideal to have Funky on the support side, along with Cranky and Candy. With Cranky Kong assisting through the adventure, I think it would be huge to give each Kong one more new ability to keep things interesting. Starting with the leader, DK, he will obtain Gorilla Grip, an ability that will allow him to hold onto certain materials to climb up walls. This will allow the player to explore hard-to-reach areas and discover more collectibles. Diddy Kong's Peanut Pop Gun is getting a unique twist. The Peanut Piercer will allow him to charge up an attack that will plow through enemies and obstacles. For Lanky Kong, he will obtain the Rubber Rampage ability. This will temporarily transform his body to a rubbery form, allowing him to squeeze through tight spaces and deflect certain enemy attacks. Tiny Kong's hair twirls just became more dangerous. Her new ability, Tornado Twirl, allows her to create wind as powerful as a tornado. This will come in handy for challenging puzzles and troublesome crumbling. And then there's Chunky. With his new ability, Kongquake, he can trigger seismic events that will knock enemies off their feet. This will also help reveal difficult-to-find shortcuts and unlock puzzles. As for the game's enemies, it kind of all comes down to what the plot is going to be. We could take a page out of the Donkey Kong Country book, and a member of the Kong family gets kidnapped by K. Rool. Perhaps it could be Kitty Kong, God protect the little ones. While the ending of the game would reveal that it was K. Rool who kidnapped Kitty Kong, wanting his revenge from the previous game, I think an exciting twist is needed, which I will reveal as we explore more of this sequel. To have a new rotation of levels to explore, perhaps it makes sense for the plot to pull the Kongs away from DK Isle. Similar to Mario Odyssey, traveling around from one world to another. If the plot is around Kitty Kong being kidnapped, it could start with receiving clues of Kitty potentially being in one world and traveling around for more clues to his location. But speaking of worlds, here's just a handful of fun ideas the Kongs could adventure in. I'm going to keep this as brief as possible so this section doesn't become dull. The first world will be Canopy Cove. This will be a little similar to Jungle Japes, with plenty of vine ropes to swing around and trees to climb for all sorts of collectibles. We gotta ease the players into the jungle vibes, something that gives off a sense of familiarity, a sense of home, and makes it fairly easy to navigate, as if the adventure has just begun and we haven't departed too far away from DK Isle. The boss fight waiting at the end will be a vicious serpent, slow moving but spits out venom and can camouflage into the background. Exiting Canopy Cove would bring the players to the far coast of the island, introducing them to Breezy Bay.
Shout out to Renegade Gamer for having a similar idea.
It'll be the water level of the game, without the annoying mechanics of your typical bad water design. I want this world to have a similar flow to the Seaside and Lake Kingdom in Mario Odyssey, or Everbay Coast in Kirby and the Forgotten Land. The kind of world that isn't a headache to navigate and the water doesn't feel like an obstacle. The boss waiting will be a large crustacean crab with crushing claws and the ability to summon waves of water to sweep the player away. Now to do a complete 180 from land, introducing Skyborn Sanctum, an abandoned fortress floating on the clouds. I love the idea of unique enemies that can only be found here, while also introducing tricky puzzles for players to solve throughout this fortress. I think back on some of the unique sky designs from past games. The City in the Sky Temple in Twilight Princess, the Cloud Zone levels in Frogger. I mean, we get a taste of cloud mechanics in Creepy Castle, but I love the concept of a unique layout with the fear of plummeting to your death. The boss fight waiting at the top of the fortress is a mysterious vulture who can summon great winds and thunder to strike. Later, the Kongs explore a new island and feel the heat of Volcano Valley.
Another shout out to Renegade Gamer.
The Kongs will make their way up an erupting volcano. The course DK Mountain from Mario Kart makes for a strong guideline. Dangerous cliffs and rolling boulders, adding in some moving lava. I would love to see similar features to the Neo Star from Kirby and the Crystal Shards. I think this also opens the door to more minecart challenges, as Donkey Kong games tend to make great minecart designs. In the depths of the volcano awaits a salamander boss that has forged into the molten rocks and lava. Players will need to time out when to throw barrels filled with water. Now to do a 180 from scorching hot volcano and into the freezing cold, frosty frontier. Similar to Crystal Cave's Falling Pillars and Boulders event, there will be occasional snowstorms that makes it challenging to explore. There will be a handful of caves to take cover, reflecting the design of Crystal Caves. I've always felt like Rare wanted this to be an ice world after all. But that doesn't mean the player can lower their guards. Ice Kremlin have evolved as they blend into the walls and jump out at Kongs, similar to the Mushroom Men in Fungi Forest. An ancient mammoth is ready to strike for this world's boss fight. With powerful stomps and a frosty breath, the Kongs will need to move carefully. For this next world, I would love to see more New Donk City. Continuing the adventure from Mario Odyssey is badly needed. The current state of the city might not translate perfectly for the Kongs, so some basic ability pads and barrels would help this experience feel more natural. As well as more musical puzzles. That's what this city is all about. Pauline asks the Kongs for their help to knock out the Kremlins and Koopas that have invaded New Donk. A unique twist to see two different enemies working together. It's like the jaw-dropping moment in the Subspace Emissary, seeing Bowser and Ganondorf together. But just when the Kongs thought they defeated every Kremlin and Koopa, New Donk City loses its power. The world's boss fight, Volt Shell, a mega-sized electrified Koopa, is draining the city's power. Then we'll move into the final world, Kremlin Castle. The toughest of baddies roam this castle. Koshas, Crossbones, Probots, Puff Tops. As the player moves closer to K. Rool's room, cops will be patrolling the halls. But don't get caught, or you'll get tossed into prison, similar to the Forsaken Fortress guards in Wind Waker. All of the animal allies get a moment to shine in the spotlight, helping the Kongs push through one challenge at a time. Behind giant golden doors awaits King K. Rool, ready for his revenge against the Kongs. But once the players defeat him, they will soon discover it was actually Bowser pulling the strings from behind the scenes, pulling a surprise final boss fight. And with that, I think this is a good place to wrap it up. I like to consider this a little elevator pitch in the event I someday run into a Nintendo developer. Well, not an elevator pitch, this is way too wordy, but perhaps a presentation pitch. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's plenty more concepts and designs to deep dive into. I'd love to know what you think of a hypothetical sequel and what you would want to see. I think at the end of the day, the thing we want most is more Donkey Kong 64 with updated graphics and stronger mechanics. Maybe one day. Thanks for watching and see you next time.